Hello everyone, Pulse here with some more World of Warcraft Warlords of Draenor discussion. And in this video we're going to talk a fair bit about the brand new stats coming our way in the next expansion. Now if you've watched the prior Warlords of Draenor discussion and coverage, you probably know that I've already discussed the brand new stats, but the thing is Blizzard continues to give us some more information. So instead of just having tertiary stats being introduced into the game to replace hit, expertise, dodge, and parry, we're actually getting some more official replacements in the form of the following stats: multi-strike, readiness, and amplify. Now let's first talk about multi-strike. Multi-strike is going to provide each ability the second chance, or two separate chances rather, to hit a target an additional time for 30% damage. Essentially what this does is, for example, you cast your fireball, and when the fireball is flying through the air, the game calculates twice with a double dice roll. Will it hit? If it's successful, will it crit? That kind of thing. Now during the multi-strike thing, it's going to calculate if it hits and it's successful, will you get a multi-strike? And then if that's successful, will it crit? So now you have this ability to, every spell, if you have multi-strike on your gear, has a chance to hit a second time, and maybe even a third time if you have enough multi-strike and the RNG gods are in your favor. Now, multi-strike and cleave as well are considered proc style abilities, so they're trying to stay away from procking other procs. That would be way too OP, so Blizzard's looking for that situation to not occur very often, if ever. Now, one of the cool things that was talked about for multi-strike is that healing will be affected by multi-strike, which is awesome in general. The fact that this isn't just a DPS kind of secondary stat is pretty damn cool, but also that dots and hots will be affected by multi-strike in a way that it calculates each tick as a separate hit and thus has a second chance to do a multi-strike hit of healing or damage. Now, one of the things that needs to be mentioned as well is that some of the abilities and talents we have in the game might need some tweaking or have some caveats established to keep them from getting really OP with a numerous amount of multi-strike on your gear. One of the examples that was given by the community was if you play an elemental shaman and you're playing with the Echo of Elements talent and you have overload proccing, those hits are supposed to count maybe, so we could have a potential scenario where 6 to 12 hits were occurring with every spell you cast. And because of this, Blizzard was saying that they're going to maybe tweak the way that overload would work with multi-strike or similar such things, or again maybe put some caveats in place, put some rules in place so that this doesn't get really out of hand. Now the next stat I wanted to talk about was readiness, which is just going to increase the cooldown recovery rate, essentially dividing and lowering your cooldown of some of your class abilities. Now they made sure to highlight the some part of it and made sure to specify that this stat is essentially cooldown reduction for the abilities that we label as heavy cooldown, such as burst or healing, DPS skills, your survivable skills, your oh shit buttons, those kinds of things. This is going to be a stat which gives the player a little bit more control of these types of abilities. Now, the one thing that I've come to think about when I was looking at readiness and its potential in the game is how this is going to affect some of the classes and the skill sets that use lower cooldown abilities, like the 1 minute range, that kind of thing. Will this be prevalent enough to allow those kinds of abilities to be used frequent enough to maybe be like normal rotation status? I'm curious to see if this is a thing that can occur. I kind of hope not, I really do, but we'll have to see how prevalent it is on gear before we have any semblance of how this is going to work. Now finally, I wanted to talk about Amplify, which it affects so much stuff. It's hard to really see how it's going to fit, but Amplify is going to do tons of stuff. First, it's going to give a percentage boost to your crit damage and your crit healing multipliers, as well as your multi-strike damage and your multi-strike healing multipliers. And it's also going to give a bonus percentage to your haste, mastery, readiness, spirit, and armor that is acquired from gear. So essentially you're going to have this bonus to your crit damage and crit healing and multi-strike healing, and then it's also going to give a boost to your other stats, an example being 10% amplify with 1000 haste on your gear, would equate to 100 bonus haste, and so you'd have a total of 1,100 after the calculations. Now, the big thing to take away from this is maybe 100 doesn't seem like a lot, but because this is so overarching in the way that it encompasses your character, it is going to affect all of your stats, and maybe it's going to give enough boost. Now, the one thing that had me kind of interested in, and also kind of wondering where this is going to fit, is because of the polynomial scaling that is going to occur with this stat, it's really hard to see where it's going to fit. My first impression is that it's too broad. It's not going to fulfill any real role, because the specs in this game, the way that this game is played, is very straightforward and linear. Once you figure out your stat priority at certain thresholds and things like that, it is kind of complicated, but essentially once you figure out your stat priority, you want to stick to that very concretely for optimal output. And because this doesn't actually provide any sort of stat weight in the priority system, it doesn't actually fit into any stat prioritization that is currently in the game that we currently know about. How is this going to fit? And the only real thing that came to mind is it's not going to be prevalent enough on gear to matter. It's going to sit there as a bonus, and maybe some classes, some specs will have a very small niche where they like Amplify. But I'm thinking more than likely what's going to happen, it will come into light maybe midway or late in the expansion, where Amplify will be prevalent enough that most classes will try to meet an Amplify threshold of sorts, where the multipliers just sort of meet this area where taking Amplify to this level gives the optimal multiplier for my crit damage and my crit healing and that sort of thing. So then you try to get to that threshold and hold it as best you can, and then go back to prioritizing your other stats for the extra benefit. That's really the only real thing I see Amplify doing. But again, we don't know a lot about these stats. These are very early implementations. These are not anything to really go off 100%. This is very early. We don't know how they're going to be tweaked, and for all we know, they could just be scrapped. That's really what we have to keep in mind. These are very early. Now, overall, I'm really excited. I absolutely am. I think these are really, really cool. They're kind of risky in their implementation. They're kind of RNG heavy for a lot of people to accept, and they have a lot of potential to ruin the balance. But honestly, I'm not focused on that. In the current, I'm really focused on the fact that Blizzard is taking some risks and doing some unexpected things when it comes to the underlying base of the gameplay in World of Warcraft. The only real thing that came to mind that I can count as a negative with this is why is Reforging leaving us now? Because I think these stats would really benefit from the ability for the player to change these stats around. And I'm thinking that Reforging getting removed is a good call, mainly because Blizzard themselves don't know how these are going to fit into the stat ecosystem. And I'm thinking, and I really wouldn't be too surprised if Reforging gets introduced into the game again in the future. Maybe they'll make some tweaks to how the system works, make it a little bit more streamlined, more user-friendly, and more along the lines of what they wanted it to be, where it would fulfill this ability for the character to tweak their playstyle, that sort of thing. And they would then have enough time to look at the new stats in the game and have a better semblance of how to balance them, so then Reforging wouldn't be such this crazy thing to re-implement. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that were the case. Now, finally, I wanted to weigh in a little bit on this whole spirit is a secondary stat thing healers are complaining about. Now, as a healer myself, I at first was scratching my head as well, as most people were, thinking about, well, spirit as a secondary stat isn't going to change anything in terms of how gear is passed out, because we'll still have a situation where the gear is tossed away if we don't have that spec or that role filled, or those roles already have everything they need. Now, the thing that I came away with this after thinking about it is that it's not quite as bad as the intellect plate thing, which a lot of people are going to as their kind of go-to answer. The thing is, with spirit gear, it is absolutely healer only. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Spirit gear is healer gear, and it will be disenchanted if it doesn't provide a bonus to any of the other roles, which currently it's not going to. The big difference is that intellect plate was always this situation where it was usable by one class and one spec, and sometimes you didn't even have a paladin available. The difference is Spirit is going to be usable by 5 different classes on their respective healing specs. This, coupled with the fact that Spirit will only appear on weapons, trinkets, necklaces, rings, and cloaks, means that your composition isn't going to matter so much. Compared to Endplate, the odds are way higher in this new system that someone somewhere in your raid comp will be able to use the item dropped, even if it's just for an offset healer spec. In the grand scope of things, having Spirit on gear pieces anyone can equip essentially is much more streamlined, much more user friendly, flexible, and all around more acceptable compared to what we've seen with the prior dropping issues in WoW's past. But I think that's going to do it for me on this one, guys. There's lots to take in here, but I tried to keep it as straightforward and streamlined as possible. What do you guys think about the new stats? Let me know down in the comments below what you're thinking of multi-strike readiness and amplify. Also, are you still worried about the Spirit thing? I'm actually totally okay with it. I think it's going to fit fine. But again, let me know down below. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and if you enjoyed this video, found it even a little bit informative, make sure to hit that like, subscribe, comment down below on anything discussed today, share with your friends, and all of that good stuff. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for me, guys. See you on the next one. Bye.